Coming to the third stanza of this poem, it reads, "Yet stop I did. In fact, I often do." Now, this is the continuation of the second stanza. He said that I reflected there whether this place was worth stopping for or not, and I realized that this place was not stopping for. I should not have stopped here. Yet stop I did, but I stopped. I stayed here for a while, and I often do. This is not for the first time that I have stopped here, that I have entered the church. I often do. And what is the result? And always end much at the loss like this. And as often as I go, I have to donate these 6 Irish pences. So this is the loss that I suffer always when I am here. Then again you will find that this is a place which for Philip Larkin is no profitable, is of no profit. Rather is of no significance, of no importance at all. Wondering what to look for, wondering too, when churches fall completely out of use, what we shall turn them into. There is another loss for me, and that is, what shall I look for? What will I do here after I have entered the church? Why have I come here? What will I do now? But then I also wonder, what will happen when these churches will fall out of use? Falling out of use means when there would be more people like me who will be indifferent towards churches, who will realize that going to the church is not important, or we should not go to the church, or visit the church like me. What will happen to them? Or what will we do to them? What would be then the function of these churches and these cathedrals? How will we react to these buildings? What will we make of them? What will we do to them? And he says, what we shall turn them into? If we shall keep a few cathedrals chronically on show, what shall we convert them into? Shall we convert them into museum, into libraries, into schools, or shall we keep them for show? Few cathedrals chronically for show. That there would be a generation after 200 years who would come and see, oh, this is the cathedral. It looked like this. This is the place where Christians used to worship 200 years ago. And they'll come and visit these cathedrals because they would be for show. Their parchment, plate and pikes in the locked cases. The parchment would be that animal skin on which people used to write in the earlier days. Plate is on the name plate perhaps of that particular thing, and pikes is that symbol or sign of cross, or where that cross is kept. Now we'll keep these 3 important places in locked cases, and people will come and see that this is what used to be in the church. And with regards to the other churches which are not cathedral or which are not of that important, what shall we do to them? And let the rest rent free to wren and sheep. Shall we avoid them as unlucky places? What will we do to the rest? We will rent them free to the wren and sheep. I said earlier that whether we'll convert them into museum, into libraries, into schools, and Philip Larkin says they are not worth it even. We can rent them free to sheep and wren. We'll just leave them to the mercy of the nature, and some shepherds who are rearing the sheep can stay a night in those buildings when it's raining. That would be the fate of churches. Or will this be the fate of the churches? That was the third stanza of this poem. Now here, what Philip Larkin is saying, because he sees that there is this wave of indifference towards the religion and church, most probably a time is going to come when these places run out of use or fall out of use. What will we do to them in that case scenario? And he says that we may keep some important buildings for show, and rest would be just rent free, of no use, of no importance. Now, next is the 4th stanza of this poem. Coming to the 4th stanza of this poem. After dark, will dubious women come to make their children touch a particular stone? Now, this is the continuation of the 3rd stanza. Either we will rent them free to the sheep and wren, or we'll keep them for show in the cathedrals, or there would be some dubious woman, some doubtful woman, a suspect woman, a superstitious woman, who would come and enter this church dark at night because she is superstitious. Maybe her children are suffering from some peculiar disease, so she still believes that church, gives may cure that particular disease, so she would come and make that child touch a particular stone. Or maybe to gain some special powers, she will do this thing. That would be one of the use of the churches once they fall out of use. Pick simples for a cancer, or on some advised night see walking a dead one. She could find here cures perhaps for the disease. Who? The suspect woman, not a illogical, a scientific woman. Or maybe, someone would tell you, if you visit the church on a particular night, you may see a dead walking there. So if you want to see, maybe these are the things which will take place in the church after they are out of use. Powers of some sort or other will go on in games, in riddles, seemingly at random. Power will always be there, whether they are in riddles, in myths, like he said, for dubious women, for suspect people, there will be something. Though that will not be logical, that would not be scientific, but it will be there. But then there will come a stage. Which stage? He says, but superstition like belief must die. If belief dies, superstition also must die. What happens when superstition dies? What happens when people are not even superstitious? What happens when this dubious woman also dies? Or this dubious woman is, is enlightened by science, by logic, by empiricism, and even she abandons the church. Even she thinks that this church of not of this use too, that we should visit this at a dark night rather than on a bright Sunday morning. What happens then? And what remains when disbelief has gone? Disbelief in everything. This means when superstition is gone. What remains behind? What will be left with? And he says, grass, weedy pavement, brambles, buttress, sikai. What will be left? A broken, shabby place where grass will grow like wild. There would be weedy pavements, paths full of grass, and there would be the buttress. There would be brambles rather. Bramble is again a kind of plant on which there are thorns, and there will be buttress, which is a support, an artificial support to a wall, and sky. These things would remain behind, and they would be of no use. What will happen then? That was the fourth stanza. Now, fourth stanza is the continuation of the idea of the third stanza, where the poet is still pondering over what will be church used for once people will stop to go to visit these places. And here he sees that there will be some time when these superstitious people would perhaps go into the churches, but then even they'll give up. And when even they'll give up, what would be left behind? And he says, grass, weedy pavements, brambles, buttresses, and sky. These remains would be there. Now next is stanza fifth, or fifth stanza of this poem. Coming to the fifth stanza of the poem, it reads, a shape less recognizable each week, a purpose more obscure. Now suddenly people will start forgetting this church. A shape less recognizable. Now there would be time maybe when people would say this is church, but there will come a time when people will ask, what is this? Then there must be some learned who would recognize the shape and tell them this is a church. The shape would become less recognizable. And purpose more obscure. There will be time when people will know the purpose of these buildings, that this was church. But then they will say, what was this building used for? The purpose of this will become also obscure. People will start forgetting the purpose of these buildings. People will start forgetting the structure of these buildings. They'll fail to recognize them. This time will also come, thinks Philip Larkin. I wonder who will be the last, the very last, to seek this place for what it was. Very interesting question is this. The last man who will visit the church, and who will visit the church for the purpose that it was made, that is for worship. He says, who will be the last one? And perhaps very interesting question to ponder over. There would be someone who would be last, whether he would be a very devout or not. No, Philip Larkin says, and let me read it. One of the crew that tap and jot and know what road lofts were. Now, there would be a person who is, interested in wandering around the world and seeing old places or new places. So he may be one of the persons, who would go and visit, or there would be someone who has to short something. And, he suddenly ends up being in the church. There could be a possibility of such a person being there. Or, in other words, there could be another one. For example, he says, some ruin bibber, randy for antique. Ruin bibber means there is a person, who loves to visit these old, broken places. One who loves to visit antique places. Maybe there is someone, and it would be he who would be the last one to visit the church. Or Christmas addict, counting on a whiff of a gown and bands and organ pipes and mirrors. Or maybe some Christmas addict, one who loves to, celebrate Christmas. And because he is addicted to celebrating Christmas, not for the religious purpose, but just because he is addicted, so he may come up with his whole band and full preparation on the December 25th probably, and visit last time the church. Or there could be another person. Who could that be? Philip Larkin says, or will he be my representative? My representative. Whose representative? The representative of Philip Larkin. Now, who would be the representative of Philip Larkin? The one who just visits church for fun. When there is nothing going on. When he has nothing to do. So, he visits the church. Maybe we'll have such kind of a person who will be the last person who will visit the church. That was the 5th stanza of this poem. And in this stanza, he is wondering about another thing. Initially, he was thinking about what shall we make of these churches when they are out of use. And now he is saying that who will be the last one who will visit these churches. And he gives few categories. There would be a traveler, there would be a one who loves to visit the antique places, there would be a one who is a Christmas addict, or there is someone like Philip Larkin who just visits the churches for fun. And then he says, in the next stanza, that is the 6th stanza, he will elaborate upon the representative of his.